Well, welcome everybody to the online program for the alumni of the Sunshine Coast Health Center up here in Powell River, BC. And this month, we're going to talk a little more about meaning and purpose. Meaning and purpose is really fundamental to come to terms with why addicts suffer and what an addiction really is all about. And this, of course, comes from the great psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who said that addicts use drugs and get into this addictive lifestyle as a substitute for living a life that's meaningful to them. Okay? So if Frankl's correct, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that he is, and this means whatever life that someone is going through who's vulnerable to addiction is going to get to a point where, this is it. This is life. This sucks. Right? And then the drug use, the addiction, is a response to that feeling that life is what Narcotics Anonymous called meaningless, monotonous, and boring. Okay? So we're going to spend this month in the online program talking a little more about this idea of meaninglessness in life and as a fundamental component of the addiction. And then, of course, how to get out of it, what you need to do in recovery. But the first step is always to get a firm grasp of this concept. Now, in our society, a lot more people than just addicts are living meaningless, monotonous, and boring lives. We know this from all sorts of research into various things. For example, we know that elderly people, maybe their partner died and they don't have much contact with the kids and no job to go to, and very often end up very lonely. It doesn't mean that they're going to become addicts, but it does mean that they will certainly suffer in their lives. The tricky thing about the addiction, of course, is all that brain chemistry stuff that you learned about while you were a client here. But for some people, for the people who are clients at Sunshine Coast Health Center, the solution to this problem they felt was to go and use drugs and get into that exciting lifestyle, right? That lifestyle of intensity, whatever that looked like. So if we look back, I'm just thinking about, I don't know, that'd be like 200 years ago or so. And we discover that addiction really wasn't a very big deal to most people. Right? The addiction, as we had mentioned before on the online program, really came around as a result of the Industrial Revolution, which basically was people were moving from farms and then into a city and into these big factories, and life got compartmentalized, right? And you would play one role at work and another role at home, and then if you wanted to socialize, you go to the public house, right, where you could drink, and everything got compartmentalized. But we've talked about that before in the online program. But even before that, if we look at history, addiction wasn't a huge thing. Of course, there were all of those sermons in medieval Europe, for example, condemning drunkenness, but they didn't condemn drunkenness any more than they condemned anything else that was done excessively. That one of their big things was do everything in moderation, right? But even in that famous book that we talked about before, this thing called The Divine Comedy, where, very famous book by a guy by the name of Dante, where he actually describes what hell is like, right? And there's no place in hell for the addicts, but there was for the gluttons and for the users and all these other people. The big point here being addiction was not this huge, overwhelming thing that it is today. And so some of the people make this argument that one of the reasons it's so big, of course, is because people today are struggling with what they should be doing in their lives, what makes their lives meaningful. Even when we talk to the young people today, a very common thing is, go to school, do all this, do all that. And they would say, why? Because there are all sorts of things happening in our society that for some young people, they don't find a sense of belonging. For some young people, they don't see a future. All of these kinds of things which will contribute to the addiction, or to the possibility that people may turn to addiction as a solution to this problem. Anyway, just to get a firm hold on this, and the more obvious example too, or one of the more obvious examples, is the 12-step program, where Bill Wilson made it very clear If you recall, we talked about this talk that he gave at the Shrine Auditorium in 1948, where he told the assembled crowd that the alcoholic was the fellow who was trying to get his religion out of a bottle, when what he really wanted was unity within himself and unity with God. And again, whether or not you agree with Bill Wilson's particular version of meaning and purpose, it was very clear that Wilson believed that the addict suffered because there was no real umbrella organizing principle in his life. He was just sort of wandering around the universe, and his main purpose was to get drunk all the time, right? When what he really wanted was some feeling that, I'm important, and that what I do is important, and that I can contribute, all that kind of thing. Anyway, to get a sense of, again, this idea that addiction is a response to living a life with little personal meaning, okay? And this shows up in all sorts of places. Clients here, routine things that we will hear is, this guy or my parents or somebody told me to live this life and I would be happy. I've lived that life and I'm not happy anymore. Or we ask people, well, what do you want out of life, right? And clients routinely here say, actually, I have no idea. And so it's that concept that makes the meaning and purpose in recovery so fundamentally important. At any rate, we'll be back next week and we'll delve into some of the solutions to this.